Yeah, indeed. So you're very right. So the rules are very clear. Whenever there is a third party proposing to cover part or the entirety of the cost implied by a mission performed by a member of the Commission staff, there has to be two things done. On the one hand, there has to be a clear analysis on whether or not there is a potential conflict of interest, and any support received from a third party has to be declared in an internal system. Now, to be more specific, who conducts the analysis in question? This will depend on the person at hand. It's a different person for me. It's a different person for the Director General. Now, when it comes to the Director General, as head of department, he is in charge of assessing whether there is a potential for conflict of interest involved in the mission that we are talking about. So, in other words, he himself is the authorizing officer who is supposed to conduct this analysis. This is the procedure. This analysis was conducted, let me finish. This analysis was conducted in line with the applicable procedure, and at that time, in light of the elements available and in light of the information available to the Director General, he drew the conclusion that he drew. This was the procedure, this was complied with. That's what we tried to explain on Friday.
Okay. Sorry, Susanna, you want to follow up? Yes, please go ahead.
So sorry, I'm just a bit taken aback. You're saying the person who signed off on whether there was a conflict of interest was the person, was the DG himself?
For that specific case?
Yes.
For that specific case, yes. But again, this will depend on the person. So the authorizing officer will change depending on who we are talking about. When it comes to the Director General, as head of department, of course, he's in charge of overseeing the missions of the people that he's in charge of in his own department. But when it comes to himself, as the top official of that department, he's in charge of doing so. If there's a case of doubt, if he's facing a doubt, he can, of course, always consult the political hierarchy. But fundamentally, he's in charge of conducting this analysis. So, obviously, this rule does not apply only to the Director General of DG Move. It applies to all Directors General. So that's your first question. Second, if they have to check with somebody else or not, again, it's up to their own assessment. So what the rules say is that they are in charge of running this analysis on potential conflict of interest. This is what they have to do. If they are in doubt, it's not an obligation. But if they are in a doubt, then they can consult the political hierarchy. And the third point,
The first point was about changing of the rules. So we have already said in relation to certain questions, and we discussed that on Friday here in the press room, that we are going to tighten the rules regarding missions, just to clarify further such situations, and also to tighten and restrict the possibilities for accepting travel which is paid for by other organizations, and to clarify basically in which specific cases that can be accepted, and the general direction of travel in which we are going to go is that this would be only possible in the future if the third parties that finance those trips would be either the United Nations or G7 or G20, which are organizing global events for the purpose of which it is convenient for the organizers to offer the same travel and, let's say, accommodation conditions for all invited guests. So this is the direction in which we are going to go with the tightening. So we are working on revising the guidelines, and very rapidly we are going to inform all directorates general, all services about the direction of travel, and inviting them basically to already start applying those stricter rules as soon as they can. So that is with regards to the changing of the rules. In regards to the specific cases that we discussed, Balázs explained on Friday and also now at length that the individual analysis that was made was that in that specific circumstance this didn't amount to the conflict of interest, and we also explained who made the analysis and what is the system with regards to a certain review.
Maybe to give you a bit of a context on this. So I mentioned that there are two possibilities for a mission to be financed, but on Friday I said that a third-party contribution is done in a limited number of cases. Actually, I was wrong. It's done in an extremely limited number of cases. So the figure I managed to obtain is 1.5%. So 1.5% of the missions involves contribution from third parties. And when it comes to, for example, directors general, whom, as we have just discussed, are essentially in charge of running this analysis, this figure goes down to about 0.1, 0.2%. So this is a very limited number of cases. But of course, this doesn't prevent an analysis from having to be conducted by these individuals. And in this particular case, as we said, in light of the elements known at that time to the Director General, the conclusion that he drew was that there was no conflict of interest, and that's why the mission took place.
And an additional element to add is that in that very limited number of cases when missions are paid for or their financial contributions from other parties, most of those take place in the EU member states in relation to events organized by the presidencies, for instance, or other member states or conferences, where those guests were invited to speak.